Did you hear that right? Or did the palace just quietly rewrite royal history while the world was distracted? Because behind those guarded gates, beneath centuries of tradition and carefully polished smiles, something explosive has erupted. Something so precise, so calculated, it doesn't feel like family drama anymore. It feels like a silent execution. And at the center of it all, a brother, a title, and a move that looks less like justice and more like a warning. Prince William has done the unthinkable. Not whispered, not hinted, not leaked through sources close to the palace. No, this was clean, formal, legal, ruthless. He has moved to strip Prince Harry of the Duke of Sussex title, not as gossip, not as speculation, but as a structured, documented operation that feels like it was waiting for the exact moment to strike. And here's where it stops being just shocking and starts becoming unsettling, because the title isn't being erased. It's being handed over, passed, redirected, transferred like a crown piece in a chess game to a 15-year-old boy who wasn't even standing on the board a moment ago. James. Quiet, hidden, almost invisible in royal terms until now. Suddenly, he's not in the background anymore. He's the replacement. And that raises a question nobody wants to say out loud. Was this always the plan? Because when you start pulling at the threads, when you line up the dates, the meetings, the silence between announcements, it doesn't look like anger. It looks like strategy. A strategy that didn't begin yesterday or last week, but months ago, quietly building piece by piece while Harry was still telling his version of the story. And then came Australia, March 2026, Sydney. What looked like just another visit, low-key, private, almost forgettable, suddenly becomes the ignition point. But here's the twist. The palace didn't react to Australia. The palace used Australia, because what unfolded there wasn't one mistake. It wasn't one headline. It was a pattern so layered, so detailed, it almost feels like it was being watched in real time, documented, categorized, filed away like evidence in a case that was already prepared. 8 categories, not rumors, not speculation, categories. And the first one, it hits hard. A private meeting, quiet, closed doors, but not harmless. Harry sits down with the Australian Prime Minister, no clearance, no notice, no coordination with the palace, just a conversation that wasn't supposed to happen, and yet it did. And in that room, according to what later surfaced, Harry wasn't just talking, he was positioning himself, offering himself as a kind of unofficial voice, a parallel royal presence. Think about that. A parallel royal. And suddenly, it's not just a family disagreement anymore, it's competition. Then comes the security gap. 7 hours. 7 unaccounted hours where a man still tied to the monarchy moves without coordinated protection in a foreign country, already questioning its relationship with the crown. 7 hours that security experts now describe not as oversight, but as exposure. And it keeps stacking. Money flows in. $250,000 speaking fee, routed in ways that raise questions nobody can easily answer. Not declared in ways that calm the situation, but in ways that make it murkier. And the deeper you look, the less it feels accidental. Then comes the image. The uniform, the medals, worn publicly despite being formally stripped years ago. A detail so small to the casual observer, but inside the institution, it lands like a challenge, a statement, a refusal to let go. And now the pattern is unmistakable. Because while one audience is being told this is a private visit, another is being shown something very different. Carefully curated media coverage, selectively distributed, creating 2 realities at the same time. One controlled, one implied. And the palace watching both, recording both, saving everything. And then the moment that changes everything. A private dinner, closed room, 47 people. No cameras, or so he thought. But words have a way of escaping rooms, especially the wrong ones. And what was said in that room wasn't mild. It wasn't cautious. It was direct, describing the monarchy not as strong, not as stable, but as declining. Managed decline. His father is still king. His brother is next. And Harry is dismantling it with words. Pause there. Because that's not just criticism, that's fracture. And then the final move, the one insiders now call the point of no return, a meeting, quiet, almost invisible, but not insignificant, with figures tied to a movement whose entire purpose is to remove the monarchy from power. And Harry doesn't reject them, he doesn't distance himself. He listens, he engages, he acknowledges. And somewhere in London, that line gets crossed. Because stepping away is one thing, but standing near the edge of abolition, that's something something else entirely. And here's the part that should make you stop and think. While all of this was happening, every meeting, every misstep, every word, something else was already in motion. Not loudly, not publicly, but quietly, precisely like a mechanism being assembled behind a locked door. Legal frameworks, historical statutes, meetings with advisors, quiet consultations that didn't wait for Australia, they anticipated it. So ask yourself, was this ever about one trip, or was the trip just the trigger they were waiting for? Because when you look at how quickly everything moved after Sydney, how seamlessly the narrative shifted from observation to action, it doesn't feel reactive. It feels inevitable. And now here we are. A title hanging in the balance, a brother on one side, an institution on the other, and a teenager in the middle about to inherit something far heavier than a name. Because this isn't just about Sussex anymore. It's about power, control, and who gets to define the future of the monarchy, the one who walked away or the one who stayed and waited. And the most unsettling part, this might only be the beginning. And just when you think the shock has peaked, it twists again, deeper, colder, more calculated than anyone expected. Because this is no longer about what Harry did. That part, explosive as it is, has already been dissected, categorized, almost clinically preserved like evidence in a courtroom waiting for its moment. No, now the story shifts to something far more unsettling. The mechanism, the machine behind the curtain, the quiet legal architecture that doesn't shout, doesn't leak, but moves. And here is where everything becomes chillingly precise. Because William didn't just react, he activated something old. Something buried in legal texts most people have never even heard of. Ancient statutes, dormant powers, forgotten mechanisms designed for moments of extreme rupture, not family disagreements, but institutional threats. And suddenly, those mechanisms aren't historical footnotes anymore, they're live. The first thread pulls from a law written during wartime, a law designed to strip titles from those who stood against the crown itself, not critics, not dissenters, but those aligned, even indirectly, with forces that threatened its existence. And now, that same logic is being stretched carefully, deliberately to fit a modern situation. Not war, not armies, but ideas, movements, conversations that challenge the monarchy's very foundation. Think about that leap. Think about what it means to reinterpret an old law for a new battlefield, one fought not with weapons, but with influence. Then another thread tightens. Authority over royal roles, over conduct, over who represents the institution and who does not. A framework that quietly reminds everyone watching that titles aren't personal property. They are permissions, conditional, revocable, always held at the crown's pleasure, never owned. And that realization hits differently when you understand what's happening next. Because this isn't just about taking something away, it's about giving it to someone else. A concept so unusual, so rarely invoked, it almost feels unreal. The translation of honors. Not destruction, but redirection. Not ending a title, but moving it. Like shifting a spotlight from one figure to another while the stage remains the same. And in doing that, William avoids a trap. Because removing a title entirely opens doors. Legal challenges, political debates, parliamentary involvement. But transferring it, that's cleaner, quieter, harder to fight. He doesn't know the decision has already begun to crystallize. Because while he's boarding a flight out of Sydney, somewhere else, meetings are happening. Emergency discussions, authorizations, legal strategies shifting from theory to execution. And then it accelerates. Letters sent, responses received, lines drawn. And when Harry pushes back, calling it baseless, threatening to fight, something inside the process hardens. Because at that moment, it stops being negotiable. And that's when the final phase begins. Financial systems move quietly, freezing assets, preparing transfers. Property documents shift ownership pathways before the public even knows what's coming. The machinery doesn't wait for headlines, it prepares for them. And then the signal leaks, a whisper to the media, a hint that something big is coming. Not enough to reveal the move, just enough to make the silence feel heavy, suspicious. And then it lands. The announcement. Not chaotic, not emotional. Structured, controlled, delivered everywhere at once so no one outlet owns the narrative. And just like that, the world is told. But while the public processes the shock, something else is happening beneath the surface. Something far more human, far less controlled. Because in the middle of all this precision, there's James, 15 years old. And suddenly, his life is no longer his own. Because imagine waking up as one person and going to sleep as something else entirely. Not by choice, not by ambition, but by decision decision, a decision made in rooms you were never invited into. He didn't build this story. He didn't create this conflict. But now he carries it. The title he inherits isn't clean. It isn't neutral. It's loaded with history, with controversy, with tension that hasn't even settled yet. And the weight of that, it doesn't show up immediately. It builds quietly, over time, in expectations, in scrutiny, in the unspoken comparisons that will follow him everywhere. Because every appearance, every decision, every silence will be measured against the man who held the title before him. And that's where the story shifts again, from power to consequence. Because what happens next isn't guaranteed. It branches. One path suggests silence. Harry steps back, walks away from the fight, lets the institution win without a public war. But that path requires something he hasn't shown in years: retreat. Another path leads straight into confrontation, legal battles, courtrooms, documents becoming public, conversations that were never meant to be heard suddenly laid out for everyone to see, not necessarily to win, but to expose. And then there's the path that feels most likely and most dangerous. Not a fight in court, not a surrender, but a separation that becomes permanent. Harry building something outside the institution, not leaving it behind, but redefining it from the outside. A parallel narrative, a competing identity. Not a royal in function, but never fully detached in perception. Two worlds, same family, no reconciliation. And if that happens, this doesn't end here. It stretches into years, into generations, into children who will grow up understanding that something was taken and given to someone else. And those kinds of fractures, they don't disappear. They echo. And that's the part nobody can control. Because institutions can plan, they can strategize, they can execute with precision, but they can't fully predict the human fallout. And that's where the real uncertainty lies. Because now the monarchy has done something irreversible, not just in action, but in precedent. An heir has acted with authority that feels almost sovereign. A title has been reassigned like an asset, and a line has been drawn that future generations will have to navigate whether they want to or not. So now the question isn't what happened. You already know that. The question is what this means going forward. Because if this move holds, if it survives challenge, survives scrutiny, survives public reaction, then the monarchy hasn't just resolved a problem. It has changed itself, quietly, permanently. And the most unsettling part, we still don't know how the other side will respond. Because somewhere, right now, a decision is being made. And when it surfaces, everything could shift again.